Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Sunday conversations. Today, we are going to have a conversation about Birth Continuum with Jenny Kozlow, a method she teaches extensively in her practice. But before we dive into the topic, thank you, Jenny, for joining us today.
Thank you, Susanna, for inviting me. And I'll just tell you very briefly a little bit about my experience in this field.
Yes.
Other than being a founding member of the Prenatal Alliance, which I'm very pleased about, I'm an internationally certified childbirth educator. It's actually pre, peri, and postnatal education. That's my specialty. And basically, in my career, I've taught over 6,500 couples, and I now, the last 10 years, am working internationally, giving workshops to healthcare providers about more innovative, effective teaching strategies, about perinatal communication skills, about collaboration, and I am the director of the Previta Foundation, and we try and improve prenatal education standards around the world. And I've written a few books. I'm working on another one now, but basically, and as important, I'm a mother, grandmother, and a mentor to birth workers around the world, something that fulfills me very much. So thank you.
It's so great to have you here. When you said that you were a mentor, you're also a mentor for us at Prenatal Alliance. So thank you for joining and to be one of the founders of our team. Tell us a little bit about what is the birth continuum and why do you use it for your teaching?
So I have my own teaching methodology. It's called perinatal communication and pedagogy. And even though it's not pedagogy, but I explain that when I give workshops, it has it as its centerpiece, this birth continuum, which is a visual reference chart that gives an open panorama for people to be able to see with one glance the different options for giving birth in today's world. And basically, it divides those ways of being born into two main parts, one of which is it's either going to be being born in a very natural, alternative, holistic way, or being born in a more medicalized, technocratic, institutionalized way. And these two divisions that have polarized very much not only the birth world, but many things in today's world, this means that the birth continuum helps us understand what the different ways of being born have in common and how they differ. And what are the main principles or belief systems and values that each way of being born offers. Once we understand that, then we match it with the student, the patient, or the client. We gauge where the client feels is their place on this continuum. And once we know that, then as educators, we can meet them where they are instead of assuming there's someone else and begin teaching them from our perspective, because very possibly we are on a different part of the continuum than they are. So it's extremely helpful. It's very visual and it's very clear. If I don't begin my courses explaining the continuum, then many, many things farther on will not be able to be interiorized because they won't have a context. Once this is understood, it clarifies so many things that we don't even have to ask about it. It just, everything kind of falls into place. So for me, it's like the basis of understanding. Well, basically, I I created it because I noticed that even though I was giving so much what I thought was very impartial, objective information about what birth was, oftentimes my students made decisions on how, where, and with whom to have their baby that seemed really opposing what we had learned in the class. And I thought, wow, I'm missing something here. And what I wasn't really understanding was the belief system and value system of my students. because I hadn't taken the time to really investigate and show enough interest in hearing their own voice from the very start. Once I began to understand that, I was less judgmental and I was able to validate them. And once that happened, our working relationship became so much more productive. So I just feel that whether you're a birth worker or whether you're pregnant, actually, I find this is helpful for all of us. It just makes it so much clearer why people who seem to be so different than us believe what they believe. You know, it's like we scratch our head, well, how can they think that way? Well, they have a reason. And so this is the basis for collaboration, for understanding what we have in common, how we can work more together. But it begins with our being interested in wanting to really meet the other where they are.
So how does this idea that you have created through your experience can help us understand why couples, choose different kinds of birth?
So when we get a sense of where they feel they stand on the continuum, we basically are going to look at three main things as educators. From the beginning of a consultation or a class or a course, we're going to use strategies that are basically going to look at three main things. The main thing is their languaging, the words they use to express what they think and what they feel. This is going to give us so much information, and one of the most important ones is their perception of risk. Because of their perception of risk, this is going to push them towards prioritizing safety versus other qualities they want present in the birth. Okay, so it's going to show us the vision they have. We have to understand why they have that vision. Where did they get that vision? And oftentimes, their primary healthcare provider has planted this idea of risk or non-risk in their minds. Maybe they've had a difficult first birth, or something has happened and or something happened in their childhood, or something, they were told something about childbirth that they haven't been able to really change that narrative. So we're seeing that vision, we're seeing that perception of risk, we're seeing the influence their primary caregiver has on them. And that's going to really help us understand why they're focusing towards a certain kind of birth or other. The other thing we're going to be watching for is the relationship with their body. Okay, this is very subtle. We're going to see, and I teach my students how to notice all these small details that seem insignificant, but they really are powerful. The way the person carries themselves, how they sit, how they walk, the closeness with which they sit with their partner, how close they are to other people in the class. A lot has to do with whether it's rigid and whether it's structural and whether it's vertical versus horizontal and open. And, all these things really tell us a lot about the values and ideas of our student. And then last is basically their appearance and their aesthetic. And their aesthetic is basically what they like to surround themselves with. The symbols, the decorative things, the colors, their taste in things. This is the world that they've created that represents them in their mind. So all that we're looking at, but most important is their languaging. So once we get a sense of the languaging and we get an idea of that, then that's going to help us see whether possibly they are imagining birth in a way that is either very fear-based or very idealistic. And when we get to these extremes, we're going to want to, as educators, try and, as I said, meet them where they are, but bring them closer to the middle. And
what do you mean? What do you mean by that middle? What is the middle? Because it feels like there's like this when you talked about. Is it a fear-based idea they have, or is it a very idealistic idea? So what is that middle?
So when we look at when we look at the continuum, we're basically going to see that the languaging they're using is going to be either words that you could put into a category of being spiritual, emotional words. And I'll show an example with this as we continue. Or they're going to be mental, physical words. Okay, so when we're hearing them talk, we're seeing whether they're basically, on this side or on this side. When we understand that, we see if you can notice the shape of this, it's basically a tree. And when we get on this side, which is the medical, technocratic, mental, physical side, it's rooted in the roots of the tree. This is a very grounding place to be. Okay, this is a very left brain, rational, logistical, sequential, linear place to be. Okay, and this is how the person experiences their world around them, either from this place or possibly on this side, which is more the branches and the leaves and the flowers and the trees and all the things that are free flowing that are on the top of this tree. And here, because of the way they have expressed themselves and these other things I said that we should notice, we're going to see them being more flowing and more flexible and more caring about humanistic traits in their relationships. They're going to be looking for connection. They're going to have other ideals and other values and principles on what they feel is important in their lives. Okay. When we talk about these extremes, if they're way over on the extreme of this side over here, they're going to not be able to experience joy or wonder. They're going to be so stressed because all they want is for nothing to go wrong. They're going to put all their energy into preventing that something bad happens. This is their mindset, and anything that makes them feel that they might be responsible for something going wrong creates tremendous anxiety for a person that identifies with this side. Okay, when we go over to the other extreme, we have a version of birth that is, as I said, idealized, but even more than that, it's considered so transformative that it's otherworldly. It's an out-of-body experience practically. It's not grounded in the physical. It's really metaphysical, and it creates a very high expectation for birth. And even though, who are we to change a person's mind view, we want them to kind of reach a point where they're balanced in both of these, because birth is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And we need every one of these things in order to live it in a balanced way as much as possible. And so we're trying to prevent disillusion, trauma, difficulty in adapting to, the postpartum because of this not having the birth that they imagined. And I'm sure we have so many people today, whether they've had a birth on this side or this side, who are not feeling satisfied with the way that their baby was born.
So that brings us to the question for what happens when we as professionals don't see or we don't respect the different values that couples may have, and let's say here for pregnant women that they have about the birth experience they want.
Yeah, well, this happens a lot. We have, let me go into detail and then I'll finish that point. On this natural, holistic, alternative side, this is where we're going to see home birth and birth centers. Those are the places where babies will be born on this side. On the other side, we have public hospitals and private clinics. Okay. What does that mean? That means at a home birth, it will probably be a midwife attending, and it will be a vaginal natural birth. If it's a birth center, it will be a vaginal birth with a minimal amount of medical intervention. And it will probably be attended by a midwife or possibly an OBGYN who may be on staff. When we cross over this middle trunk, where I'm hoping that we all come together ultimately, we will see that in public hospitals, the births are either vaginal with a high incidence of medical intervention with an epidural and cesareans. And a private clinic is basically all cesareans, with few exceptions in today's world. But there's a difference between a cesarean after the birth started spontaneously after having hours of labor versus a programmed cesarean section, which I'm putting at the farther, more technical side of what happens in a private clinic. And that will be attended usually by an OBGYN. Whereas in a hospital, it might be an obstetrical nurse, it might be a midwife, it might be a doctor. We have these different professionals. Okay, so that means that when we choose a certain place, we're directly or indirectly choosing a certain type of birth with this certain professional. It's a package deal, and so what does that mean? It means that if you want more than anything else to feel connected to your child and have that oxytocin flowing and have this loving environment where you can just trust your body and experience it, well, the ideals or the principles that we'll find on the medical technocratic side, it's not that you don't find them there, but it's harder to find. It's less likely, some would say it's impossible that you'll be able to get some of those things on this side versus the other side. But why should we have to sacrifice anything the way we want our child to be born? But we do have to learn the art of negotiation, because by choosing one side, we're always giving up certain things we also wanted. But what we're doing is we're prioritizing what is most important. And that's what's going to drive that couple to say, because of that, I'm going to have my baby in this place, this place, this place, or this place. Now, they don't necessarily have total free reign to just choose whichever place they want. There are factors that are involved with why couples choose where, with whom, and how they want their baby to be born. The most discriminated against category are birth centers, because I think a lot of people want the values and the principles that a birth center offers, but there aren't that many birth centers. So I think if there were more, that would be a very nice balance between this side and this side, because it's very close to the middle.
Yes, and a lot of times we want the settings of the birth center in the hospitals.
Yes, yes. And since that's not really possible now, birth centers are a good in-between, where some people aren't quite convinced they want a home birth because of the safety issue in their mind. I'm not saying it's real, but they perceive it to be less safe. And so the birth centers, if there were more of them, I think more people would choose them. The only way of being born that doesn't require money is a public hospital, because the other ones have a price tag and some people can simply just not afford them. There's status involved with why we choose what we choose. There's a lot of peer pressure, family pressure, partner pressure, social media pressure, there's trends, and that will push people to make decisions where there's status as much in a private clinic as in a home birth, which also has status. There's a relationship with authority figures. People on this side will be less likely to question authority than people on this side, for example. And let me just talk a little bit more about the differences between these two sides. When I go to an event and it's been organized by midwives or free birthers or doulas, they will be usually sitting on the floor on yoga mats in a circle. And if I go to a hospital to give a conference or a clinic, they're not sitting on the floor. They're sitting in chairs. Okay, that's the first thing that gives me a lot of information. Okay, it's pretty obvious. People on this side don't even think that anyone might not want to sit on the floor. And people on this side, it doesn't even occur to them that someone would want to sit on the floor. You know, we have these big differences. There's a lot of other things. If you want magic and mystery, you're not going to find it here. If you're going to find it at all, it's going to be over on this side. There's things like, you know, what do people want? Why have they chosen this? Well, one thing, because they feel safer. What people want here is to feel that they've made a responsible decision. And that decision is to have a really good backup plan in case of a complication. And they believe that it's very likely that there will be a complication. Okay, so for them, what are they looking for in a professional? And what do they really think birth is? And let's use this moment, Susanna, to see what you answered when I asked you to answer these questions. And these questions are some of the strategies we use to try and find out and help the couple themselves realize when they express it, where they stand. Frankly, a lot of couples don't even know that this side exists. Mm-hmm. If they're going to a prenatal course on this side, this is not even discussed. Okay, so oftentimes when I present the continuum, it's like they didn't even realize that there were viable options on the other side. Okay, so it's very interesting. But this is one of the strategies we use to help them begin to use their languaging so we can help them and ourselves understand where they are. So I asked you to say, giving birth is, and you wrote very quickly. What did you write?
Powerful. So this, just for the audience to understand, these were questions that Jenny made to me even before the interview so that we could explore now.
Okay, I love that you said powerful, because powerful is actually one of the words that puts us pretty much in the middle. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that really shows that you have one foot on both sides, and this puts you in a place that I think is really good. Power is physical, but it's also emotional and psychological and spiritual. So when we have verbs that can be attributed to any one of these ways, that's an excellent way to think, okay? It's showing that both sides of the brain are working together. But say, for example, you said that giving birth is pain. It's hard. It's challenging. It's difficult. It's risky. It's a procedure. It's reproduction, etc. Because of the way they answer, we're going to really see, you know, whether it's a mental, physical response. If they're saying it's a gift, it's connection, I put in the middle. There's words like that. Encounter, I put in the middle, for example. But if they say it's a blessing, it's sacred, it's love, many of these kinds of words, and you'll hear your students using these words, it definitely will put them on that side. And so, you know, from the very start, what we want to do is use a lot of techniques to find out how they're expressing themselves and what that says about their beliefs and their perception of risk and their values. Now let's talk about values. So I asked you to say, what do you most look for in a professional? And this is going to give us a lot of what your values are. What did you answer?
And I said encouragement.
So what you most want from your healthcare provider is encouragement. Encouragement is more on this side because the person is interested in you as a person, and they don't want to just fulfill their responsibility to make sure the baby's born safely. They know that you need more than that, encouragement to believe in yourself and trust in yourself. And so that's definitely some professional that is giving a lot of importance to the emotional and spiritual aspects of birth. People on this side will say that they want to a person who is orderly, predictable, who is reliable, who is organized, and who is very, explains things in a very clear, almost checklist manner. I mean, they're going to look for basically a competent, efficient professional. And those are really important things for someone over here. And they may feel that that is not what they're going to get over here. A person here who doesn't see the same perception of risk will say, I want to put my time and energy in someone who believes in me and my ability to give birth. Not that they will attend me and do it for me. It's seeing the person I am. So individuals on this side really want to be seen for who they are and what makes them unique. They want to customize birth where their way of birthing is respected. So that's important for them. But on this side, they really want to feel that they have some control and they have a very competent professional who's going to almost assure them that if there is a complication, that guidelines, protocols, backup plans are in place.
And this brings us to another important question, which is, so in this spectrum, how can professionals be more open to work better across this continuum that you're talking about? Because they have their own bias, they have their preconceived ideas. So how to work this out? Because you have taught us here how couples perceive it. But there's also the other parts of the professionals that are, there to support us.
And when we work with collaboration, I start out with a continuum and we really look at this part of it, the professionals who represent each way of giving birth. Some professionals feel that the way they attend birth and where they work is an extension of what they truly believe, their values and their principles. It's problematic, and we do have cases of people working in that system who feel disaligned with those values, and it's very difficult for them to work in these environments because it's just going against these things that they value that tend to be more on this other side. So what we do is we recognize that everything we're accusing these guys of doing, we're probably also doing them ourselves. For example, if you look at healthcare professionals on this side, they pride themselves in being empathetic. It's almost like they feel they have a monopoly on empathy. That a woman in a hospital, if she doesn't have a doula, then there'll be no empathy around her at that birth because the doula represents empathy, okay? That gives a message that I feel is very limiting because that's not true. There are professionals on this side who also are empathetic. The same way I say that, medical doctors do not have a monopoly on using safety measures and prevent complications in birth. Okay, that's also found in these professionals as well. So we have to be really careful when we create these absolute ideas that they do this and we do that. Okay, egos abound in all of these categories, as much on this side as in this side, because we tend to think that this is very ego, mental, patriarchal, but those characteristics, I see them as well on this side. So I think it's being humble enough to recognize that probably it's pissing me off so much what they're doing because, it's a problem I have also with myself that I haven't been able to overcome. So I think we have to get real. We have to have the courage to sit down and be vulnerable and talk about our strengths, but also our weaknesses and the things that limit us. And I think working together is looking for what we do have in common and beginning with probably the reason most all of these professionals chose the maternal year to be a part of it is because they resonate, which is a word on this side, with those values of life-giving. And everyone wants that baby to be born as healthy as possible. There isn't anyone on this continuum that thinks otherwise.
Do you
These
want to
people
do you
feel,
want to share a story where you were using this birth option continue and that helped someone to be more understood, more supported, that helped a professional? Because a point that I also see there on the chart is that sometimes you have professionals that go from one side to the other,
yes,
right?
these
Which
are
is
my favorite
very,
ones.
very interesting.
So when I do my live interviews and when I want to highlight professionals making a difference in the birth world, they will always be people who have migrated from one side to the other and really embody the qualities of both sides. For me, that's the future. That's where we're going to really resolve so many issues, and birth will become better when we begin to understand that we all need each other. That it's not that empathy is the most important. No, being organized and grounded and responsible and is also very important. What we want to meet in the middle with is that we're all imperfect and make mistakes and do the best we can. That kind of humility and compassion is what we need to give to ourselves, but give to other birth workers as well. So yes, my very favorite professionals are the ones that represent bringing together of all of these qualities. And there are every day more and more. We have doctors and nurses who become doulas. We have doulas who are studying to be midwives. I mean, for me, that is fantastic. And that's the way to go. And so that's kind of in a nutshell, basically what the continuum can do, among lots of other things. But I don't know, has it been helpful for you to understand the idea?
Yes, definitely. And another thing is that it feels like that we can see ourselves. And I have three children, so the experience of my birth in how I started and how I changed to one side to the other. And I think on my third pregnancy that I was much more in the middle because of the experience that I have. Jenny, thank you
Exactly.
so much. Thank you so much. It was so enlightening. I wish that we even had more time to explore, because I think that what you have just said, although it's very, it was in a very short time so that everybody could understand, and I think it was very clear and enlightful. But I think there's so much more things to explore, and hopefully we'll do it in another conversation. Thank you
That
so
would be
much,
great.
Jenny.
Thank you, Susanna. Bye.